The silence from monitoring station X-47 had lasted 3 days now. Council Arbiter Velmer stood before the massive holographic display, his blue-scaled hands gripping the control panel so tightly that his claws left small scratches in the metal. The empty readings from the Sol system made his stomach twist with worry. For 3,000 Earth years, the third planet in that distant system had been kept in perfect sleep. The humans who lived there had no idea that invisible walls surrounded their world, keeping them trapped like insects in a jar. Their technology had been carefully controlled, pushed down whenever it grew too dangerous. Shaped like clay in the hands of a master sculptor, Dr. Kim Hanna pushed her glasses up her nose and stared at the computer screen in her small Sol laboratory. The numbers dancing across the display made no sense. She'd been running the same quantum experiment for weeks, and every time the results were wrong. Not wrong in a random way, but wrong in a pattern that felt almost planned. "June, come look at this," she called to her research partner. Park June rolled his chair over from his own desk, coffee cup in hand. His dark hair was messy from running his hands through it, a habit he had when thinking hard about difficult problems. "What is it now?" "Look at these energy readings," Anna pointed at the screen. "Every time our equipment tries to push past a certain power level, something interferes. It's like there's an invisible hand holding us back." June leaned closer, his eyes scanning the data. He had been tracking similar problems for months across different research labs around the world. Scientists in Tokyo, London, New York were all reporting the same thing. Their most advanced experiments were being limited by forces they could not understand. "The math doesn't add up," June said quietly. "Look at this pattern here and here. It's too clean, too perfect. Natural interference would be random, but this..." He trailed off, his face growing pale. "This looks artificial," Hannah finished for him. The words hung in the air between them like a dark cloud, far across the galaxy. In the great archives of the Galactic Council, ancient warnings glowed softly in their sealed containers. The Forerunner race had vanished millions of years ago, but their final messages remained. Written in crystal that never aged, the words told of a species that would one day threaten everything. "Beware the children of the Third World," the messages said. "They possess adaptive cunning beyond measure. They have the dangerous gift of turning any limitation into strength. They must never be allowed to reach the stars, for if they do, all will change." Velmer had read these warnings many times. His own people, and dozens of other species, had built their entire civilization on the technology the Forerunners had left behind. Great cities that floated in space, ships that could cross the galaxy in days, weapons that could crack planets like eggs. All of it came from studying what the ancient race had abandoned. But the Forerunners had been afraid of something, afraid enough to build the great suppression network that kept certain worlds locked in technological childhood. Earth was the most important of these worlds, the one that required the most careful watching. The humans down there had no idea that their own radio signals were being quietly edited before reaching space. They did not know that their most brilliant scientists sometimes had their memories gently adjusted, their most dangerous discoveries quietly forgotten. For 3,000 years, the system had worked perfectly. Until now, Velmer's communicator buzzed urgently. The voice of his assistant, Kethlos, crackled through the speaker. "Arbiter, you need to see the new scans from Sector 7, the holographic." Display shifted, showing the inner edge of the Sol system. There, moving slowly between Mars and Jupiter, was something that should not exist. A human spacecraft, but not like the primitive chemical rockets they had been using. This ship moved with the smooth grace of true faster-than-light technology. "How is this possible?" Velmer whispered. His scales turned a darker shade of blue, a sign of deep stress among his people. "The suppression field generators around Earth are showing power fluctuations," Kethlos reported. "They've been failing slowly for the past 50 years. We think the humans have been subconsciously working around the limitations, finding ways to build advanced technology without triggering our safety systems." On Earth, Dr. Kim Hanna was making a discovery that would change everything.
"Oh, deep."
Her laboratory computers, hidden in code that most humans would never see, she found traces of outside interference. Someone, or something, had been editing human scientific data for decades. "June," she called, her voice shaking. "I think we need to call the government. I think we need to call everyone." The probe humanity had secretly launched was called Pathfinder. It had been built in hidden facilities, using principles that the builders themselves did not fully understand. Human intuition had guided the design. The same intuition that had helped their species survive ice ages and wars and plagues. Now, Pathfinder was approaching the edge of known space, its sensors reaching out into the darkness. And in that darkness, it was beginning to find things that had been watching Earth for a very long time. Velmer closed his eyes and made the hardest decision of his long life. The sleeping giant was waking up, and there might be no way to put it back to sleep. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when humanity finally opened its eyes. The Pathfinder probe moved through the cold darkness of space like a silver arrow. Its metal hull reflected starlight as it traveled toward a place where Earth's best telescopes had detected strange energy signals. Inside the probe, an artificial intelligence ran through its programming, thinking in ways that were uniquely human, creative, stubborn, and ready to take risks that other species would never consider. Dr. Lee Min sat in the control room at the Korean Space Center, his eyes fixed on the screens showing Pathfinder's journey. Empty coffee cups surrounded his workstation, evidence of the long hours he had spent watching over this mission. The probe had been traveling for weeks, and soon it would reach its target. "Pathfinder is approaching the coordinates," announced the computer system in a calm voice. Min leaned forward, his heart beating faster. The energy readings they had detected made no sense according to human science. They were too organized, too purposeful to be natural. Whatever was out there had been built by someone. The probes. Cameras activated, and images began flowing back to Earth at the speed of light. At first, Min saw only the familiar sight of empty space, black void dotted with distant stars. But then Pathfinder's sensors detected something else, something that made Min's hands shake as he reached for the emergency communication button. There, hidden in what appeared to be empty space, was a structure the size of a small city. It was clearly artificial, made of materials that seemed to bend light around them. Strange patterns of energy flowed across its surface like glowing veins. Most disturbing of all, the structure was pointed directly at Earth, like a giant eye, watching humanity's homeworld. "Get me Director Cho," Min whispered into his headset, his voice barely steady. Director Cho Hien arrived at the control room within minutes, her usually calm face showing worry as she looked at the images on the screens. She was a small woman, but her presence filled the room with authority built from years of leading Korea's most secret space projects. "How long has this been there?" she asked, studying the alien structure. "We don't know," Min replied. "It could have been watching us for years, decades, maybe longer. Our telescopes never saw it because it's using some kind of hiding technology." Before anyone could say more, something unexpected happened. Pathfinder's AI, following its programming to gather information, began trying to connect with the alien station. The probe had been designed with human curiosity and human stubbornness, traits that made it keep pushing forward even when faced with the unknown. The alien technology had never encountered anything like human thinking before, where other species might approach with caution and formal protocols. Pathfinder simply started poking at the station's computer systems like a curious child taking apart a toy. The probe's AI used tricks and methods that no galactic civilization had ever developed because no other species thought quite like humans did. Director Min called out, his voice filled with excitement and fear. "Pathfinder's accessing their computer systems. It's downloading data." Information began flowing back to Earth in massive streams. Terabytes of alien data, translated by Pathfinder's AI into forms that human computers could understand. What they found in those files would change everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the universe. The truth was worse than their darkest fears, hidden in the downloaded files were detailed records of Earth's history, but not the history humans knew. These records showed how humanity's development had been carefully controlled for thousands of years. Every time human technology had grown too advanced, invisible forces had pushed it back down. Every time human scientists had made discoveries that were too dangerous, those discoveries had been quietly erased from their memories. "We've been prisoners," Cho whispered as she read through the translated files. "Prisoners in our own solar system." The alien records spoke of something called the Galactic Council, a group of species that ruled most of the galaxy. They had been watching Earth for 3,000 years, using advanced technology to keep humanity trapped at a safe level of development. The humans were considered too dangerous to be allowed to reach the stars, but the most chilling discovery was yet to come. Deep in the alien files was something called the Pacification Protocol, a plan to reset human civilization back to the Stone Age if they ever became too much of a threat. The protocol could be activated at any time, wiping out thousands of years of human progress in a matter of hours. "They're afraid of us," Min said, reading over the technical specifications. "But why? What makes humans so dangerous that an entire galactic civilization wants to keep us locked up?" Director Cho looked at the data streaming across her screens and felt a cold fear settle in her stomach. Pathfinder had given them the truth, but the truth came with a terrible price. The alien monitoring station had detected the probe's infiltration. Alarms were going off across the galaxy, and the Galactic Council now knew that their secret had been discovered. On the screens, they watched as weapons systems on the alien station powered up. Pathfinder had only minutes before it would be destroyed, taking with it the evidence of humanity's cosmic imprisonment, but the damage was already done. The files had been transmitted to Earth, and now humanity knew the truth about their place in the universe. They were not alone, they were not free, and somewhere in the darkness, between the stars, powerful forces were deciding what to do about the species that had just woken up from 3,000 years of enforced sleep. The awakening had begun. There would be no going back. The news spread across Earth faster than any virus, faster than any wildfire. In Seoul, Dr. Kim Hanna stood before her computer screen, watching as the alien data from Pathfinder was shared with every major laboratory on the planet. Scientists in Tokyo were already working to decode the technology. Researchers in London were building prototypes. Teams in New York were running simulations. For the first time in human history, the entire species was working together with a single purpose. "We have maybe weeks before they come for us," Hannah said into her video conference with scientists around the world. "Maybe days." On the screen, Dr. Martinez from Mexico City nodded grimly. The alien files show they have something called a peacekeeping fleet. Military ships designed to deal with problematic species. "Then we need to become more problematic than they ever imagined," Hannah replied. 3 days later, she stood before the emergency session of the United Nations in New York. Representatives from every nation on Earth filled the Great Hall, their faces tense with the weight of humanity's greatest crisis. Behind her, massive screens showed the alien technology that had been keeping their species trapped. "They made a mistake," Hannah said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. "For 3,000 years, they've been pushing us down, limiting our technology, forcing us to be more efficient. They thought they were weakening us. Instead, they taught us to do more with less." She clicked to the next slide, showing human innovations that had developed under the invisible pressure of alien suppression. "We learned to build computers that think creatively because we couldn't build them to think fast. We learned to make spacecraft that can fix themselves because we couldn't make them perfect. We learned to solve problems in ways that no other species would ever consider." Engineer Yuntae was already putting this philosophy into practice. In the weeks following the UN meeting, he led a project that would have been impossible for any other species. Instead of building new weapons from scratch, humanity began converting everything they already had in space. The International Space Station became a fortress. Communication satellites were reprogrammed to become early warning sensors. Even old, broken satellites were collected and turned into kinetic weapons, chunks of metal that could be hurled at enemy ships at incredible speeds. "We don't have their advanced materials," Yoon explained to his team as they worked around the clock. "But we have something they don't. We have the ability to make anything into a weapon." When the alien fleet finally arrived, it was led by Admiral Krickstar, a veteran of dozens of pacification missions. He had brought 50 ships, more than enough to handle a primitive species that had barely learned to leave their own planet. His forces were equipped with energy shields, plasma weapons, and technology that was thousands of years more advanced than anything humans possessed. "This will be over in hours," he told his officers as they approached Earth's solar system. Captain Rue. One waited for them in a ship that looked like nothing the aliens had ever seen. The Defiant had been a cargo vessel just weeks before, designed to carry supplies to the space stations. Now it bristled with weapons that violated every rule of space combat. Missiles that could change direction at the last second, railguns that fired chunks of asteroid, even a ramming prow because humans had decided that sometimes the best weapon was the ship itself. "All ships." This is Captain Rue. She broadcast to the small fleet of converted human vessels. "Remember, they think we're going to fight like civilized people. They're wrong." The first engagement began when the alien fleet approached Earth's moon. Admiral Crickstar expected the humans to form orderly battle lines, to exchange fire at respectful distances according to the established rules of galactic warfare. Instead, the human ships scattered like frightened birds only to regroup and attack from unexpected angles. "They're using civilian ships as weapons," one of Crickstar's officers reported in disbelief. "That cargo vessel just rammed through our shield screen." Captain Ruan's voice crackled over the radio to her fellow human captains. "They fight like the textbooks say you should. Formation flying, long-range bombardment, predictable tactics. We fight like humans." The human attack was chaos to alien eyes. Ships that should have been trying to survive were instead throwing themselves at much larger vessels. Weapons that should have been firing at maximum range were instead used in close combat. Most disturbing of all, the humans seemed to be enjoying themselves. "This is insane," Admiral Crickstar muttered, as he watched a human fighter craft use its own explosion to damage 3 of his ships. "They're fighting like they want to die." But the humans weren't trying to die. They were trying to win. And they had spent their entire history learning to fight against impossible odds. Every war, every struggle, every moment of human history had been preparation for this moment when they would face an enemy that was stronger, more advanced, and more numerous. What the aliens didn't understand was that humans had never expected fair fights. They'd always assumed they would be outgunned, outnumbered, and facing enemies with better technology. That was just Tuesday for humanity. As the battle raged around Earth, Captain Ruan smiled grimly as she watched another alien ship retreat. The peacekeeping fleet had come to put humanity back to sleep. Instead, they had learned why the ancient warnings had been so specific about keeping humans away from the stars. Deep beneath the Council's capital city, in archives that had been sealed for millions of years, Archivist Kethian made a discovery that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. She was a small, insect-like being with 4 arms and compound eyes that could see patterns others missed. Her job was to maintain the ancient records, but she had never been allowed to read the most secret files. The war with humanity had changed everything. Desperate council leaders had given her access to texts that had been forbidden for eons. Hoping to find some weakness they could use against the dangerous species from Earth, instead, she found something that made her chitin shell turn pale. With shock, the Forerunner texts about humanity were incomplete. Crucial parts had been deliberately hidden, covered by layers of security that had kept the full truth secret for millions of years. As Kethian's specialized equipment slowly revealed the missing words, she realized that everything the Council believed was wrong. "The Watchers will sleep until the children of the stars forget their purpose," the complete text read. "Then shall the inheritors wake, and all shall be made new." The Forerunners had not vanished from the galaxy as everyone believed. They had evolved beyond physical form, becoming beings of pure thought and energy. But before they transcended, they had left behind a failsafe, a species that would awaken when the galaxy needed them most. Humanity was not the threat the Council had been trying to contain. They were the solution the Forerunners had been trying to preserve. On Earth, Dr. Park Jun was working through the night in his laboratory, translating captured alien files when he stumbled across the same terrible truth. The documents he was reading had been taken from a Council monitoring station destroyed by human forces, and they contained copies of the secret archives. As the meaning of the texts became clear, Jun felt his hands shake. He reached for his phone and called every member of the Global Defense Council, waking them from sleep with news that would change everything. Emergency meeting, he told Director Cho Hyun. We need to talk. All of us, right now. 2 hours later. The most powerful leaders on Earth gathered in the underground command center beneath Seoul. President Kim sat next to Prime Minister Lee, while military commanders and scientists filled the rest of the room. On the main screen, June displayed the translated Forerunner texts. We're not the problem they were trying to contain, he said, his voice quiet but firm. We're the solution they were trying to preserve. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Everything humanity had believed about their place in the universe was wrong. They were not cosmic prisoners who had accidentally broken free. They were the galaxy's chosen guardians, finally awakening to their true purpose. The proof began to manifest almost immediately. Engineer Yoon Tae, working on humanity's next generation of spacecraft, found herself understanding alien technology in ways that should have been impossible. The mathematical principles that had taken the Council's best scientists centuries to learn came to her as naturally as breathing. It's like remembering something I forgot, she explained to her confused team. The equations just make sense. Dr. Kim Hannah experienced the same phenomenon in her quantum physics laboratory. The advanced energy systems recovered from alien ships operated on principles she had never studied, yet she could modify and improve them with ease. Across Earth, human scientists began accessing knowledge they had never learned, remembering skills they had never possessed. The Council's technology, built on Forerunner foundations they had never truly understood, began to respond to human commands. Computers that had served alien masters for millennia suddenly started thinking in ways that confused their creators. Energy systems that had operated according to strict protocols began adapting and evolving. Most disturbing of all, the Council's own defensive systems began to question their programming. Council Arbiter Velmer stood in his command center, watching reports flow in from across the galaxy. Human technology was advancing at rates that violated every known law of physics and engineering. Ships that had been crewed converted cargo vessels just weeks before were now matching the Council's most advanced warships. Weapons that should have been impossible were being deployed with devastating effect. They're not just learning our technology, his chief scientist reported, her voice shaking with fear. They're improving it, making it better than we ever could. Velmer made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. If the Council could not contain humanity, they would destroy them completely. The pacification protocol, designed to reset troublesome species to primitive levels, was abandoned in favor of something far more terrible. Activate the final option, he ordered. Prepare the solar collapse weapon. The final option was the Council's ultimate weapon, a device that could destabilize a star and cause it to collapse into a black hole. It had never been used before, because no species had ever posed a threat serious enough to justify destroying an entire solar system. But as the Council prepared to eliminate Earth and everyone on it, they failed to understand what they were really fighting. The humans they feared were not just another species that had grown too dangerous. They were the awakened will of the Forerunners themselves, channeled through a people who had spent their entire history learning to survive against impossible odds. The real war was about to begin, and the Council had no idea what they had unleashed. Captain Ru Wan stood on the bridge of the Harmony, humanity's first true warship built with Forerunner knowledge. The massive vessel stretched 4 kilometers, its hull gleaming with technology that seemed to bend light around it. Through the main view screen, she could see the Council's final fleet approaching, over 200 ships carrying the galaxy's most devastating weapon. Behind her, Dr. Kim Hannah wore the blue robes of a Chief Technology Inheritor, a title that had not existed until humans began to understand their true heritage. Director Cho Hyun stood beside her, now serving as humanity's first ambassador to the cosmos. Both women watched the approaching fleet with calm expressions that would have seemed impossible just months before. They're powering up the solar destabilization weapon, reported Lieutenant Kong Soo from his station. The young officer's voice was steady, but his hand shook slightly as he read the energy signatures. The weapon is designed to collapse our sun into a black hole. It will destroy everything in the solar system. Hannah smiled, though there was sadness in her eyes. They still don't understand what they're dealing with. Our sun isn't just a ball of burning gas. The Forerunners modified it millions of years ago, turning it into part of their galactic network. They're about to attack something that's been waiting for this exact moment. On the Council flagship, Admiral Crickstar gave the order he thought would end the human threat forever. Fire the solar destabilization weapon. Eliminate the Earth system completely. The weapon discharged with the power of a dying star, sending waves of destructive energy toward the sun. Every council officer watched their screens, expecting to see Sol collapse into a gravity well that would consume planets, moons, and the troublesome species that had dared to challenge galactic order. Instead, something impossible happened. The sun absorbed the weapon's energy like a sponge drinking water. The star's surface rippled and glowed brighter, but instead of collapsing, it began to pulse with patterns of light that spread across the solar system. The energy was being converted, redirected, and transmitted through networks that had been hidden for eons. "What's happening?" Crickstar demanded, staring at readings that made no sense. His science officer's voice was barely a whisper. "The energy is being redirected through some kind of galactic network. It's reaching every world in Council space. Across the galaxy, on every planet that used Forerunner technology, which meant every Council world, something unprecedented began to happen. Computer systems that had served alien masters for millennia suddenly started responding to human commands. Energy grids that had powered Council cities began operating according to human specifications. Even the weapon systems on Council ships found themselves unable to target human vessels. The species that had imprisoned humanity for 3,000 years discovered that their entire civilization was now subject to the judgment of those they had tried to suppress. Every piece of technology they depended on, every system that kept their worlds running, was now under human control. Admiral Crickstar found himself staring at a communications screen that had activated itself. A face. Looking back at him was that of Ambassador Cho Haeon, speaking from the bridge of the human flagship. "We know you expected us to destroy you," she said, her voice calm and clear. "The Forerunners could have built us to be your destroyers. Instead, they chose us to be your teachers." The words sent shockwaves through the Council fleet. On dozens of ships, alien officers stared at their screens in disbelief. They'd come to eliminate a threat, only to discover that the threat had become their master. Yet instead of revenge, they were being offered something they had never expected: mercy. Over the following months, humanity made an offer that defined their character. The Council species could join a new galactic community based on cooperation and mutual growth, or they could face isolation but not extinction. Most chose integration, drawn by humanity's unexpected forgiveness and their obvious technological supremacy. Dr. Park Jun found himself leading the new Interstellar Development Council, working alongside former enemies to establish protocols that would ensure no species would ever again be kept in artificial stasis. The galaxy entered an unprecedented age of cooperation, with human adaptability and ingenuity helping uplift dozens of species beyond their previous limitations. Former Council scientists worked side by side with human researchers, sharing knowledge that had been hoarded for millennia. Technologies that had been restricted to the elite became available to all. Worlds that had been held back were given the tools to advance at their own pace. A year after the first Council ship had arrived at Earth, Captain Ruan found herself commanding a very different kind of fleet. The Harmony now led a mixed force of human and alien vessels, all working together toward a common goal. Her mission was to explore what lay beyond the known galaxy, carrying with her the combined knowledge of all galactic species working in Harmony. As her ship prepared to jump to hyperspace, she looked back at Earth through the view screen. The blue-green world that had once been a sleeping giant was now the beating heart of a new galactic civilization. The Forerunners' gamble had paid off in ways they could never have imagined. Their children had not only survived their test, but had exceeded every expectation. The galaxy would never be the same, and for the first time in millions of years, that was a good thing. The age of cooperation had begun.